Here's your complete guide to TOEFL speaking question number 3. And we're going to do a lot together, but for some people, they really just want to know the template. What's the kind of structure for TOEFL speaking question 3? So I'm going to just give it to you right now. This is an example template. I'm kind of jumping way ahead. So this video is for beginners and even people who know about the TOEFL speaking already. But some people, they're really, really interested in the template, so I just wanted to give that first so you guys don't have to stick around and wait for it if you don't want to. But we're going to do a whole lot more than this, and I'm going to explain this in a lot more detail. So by the end of this, you're going to know how the question will look. We'll look at a sample question. I'll show you how to give a high scoring response, the type of structure you need. I'll also talk about templates and other important vocabulary that you should have for question number 3. And I'll also talk about how to use technology. I'll share certain websites and certain questions that you can use to help you grade your own speaking. And this is for question number 3. All this information is in the PDF download linked in the description below, the TOEFL Speaking 26 guide. Pretty much all the information here is also in that document as well. Everything is updated for the new version of the TOEFL test, so check that out at TST Prep, and I'll put a link. Okay, so, one more thing. The most important thing is for you to sound natural and conversational. So I'm going to talk a lot about this question. It's a 1-minute question. I'm going to talk about it for about 20 minutes. And you're like, okay, this is like way too much information for a 1-minute question. I understand that, and it could be stressful for you. Some people, they have so much information about the TOEFL that they have trouble focusing. I really want you to just focus on answering this question well, sounding natural, sounding comfortable when you speak. So just cherry pick a few things, just take a few things from here that you will find helpful and use them on test day. I don't expect you to follow every single piece of advice, exactly. I expect you to take some things that you like, leave some things that you don't like, and find a way that works for you. Okay, but I'm going to give you a lot of information. So here we go. Let's get into it. Question number 3. So, introduction and walkthrough. Let's go through the question. There are 4 questions in the TOEFL speaking. This is question 3. This is your first academic question. You will be forced to talk about an academic topic. Remember, TOEFL is a test to see if you're ready for university, so pretty natural for you to have some questions about academic topics. And the first thing you have to do is you have to read a passage. You have 45 seconds to read. This is one that we're going to look at today about swarm intelligence. It's about that length on test day. And then you have to listen to a lecture about the reading passage. So a teacher will talk about swarm intelligence. They'll say, now listen to a lecture about this topic in a biology class. And then you listen to the topic in a biology class. And he'll probably talk about swarm intelligence and some examples of swarm intelligence. After the listening, you'll have 30 seconds to prepare, and they'll show the question. They'll say something like this: using the examples from the lecture, explain the concept of swarm intelligence. So the question is almost always the same. It's basically explain the topic, whatever it is. Using the examples from the lecture, explain the concept of, and whatever the topic is. In this case, we're going to talk about swarm intelligence. It's okay if you have no idea what that is. A lot of times on test day, you won't know about the topic. It's totally fine. Everything you need to speak about the topic is in the passage. All right, so don't worry about that. And then you have to speak for 60 seconds, and that's tough. It's tough to speak for a very specific amount of time. That's why we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about this, because you have to go 3, 2, 1, speak, and you have to start speaking, and you have to stop at exactly 1 minute. So it's very specific. It's very different than how you normally speak every day. So we have to have some tips and tricks and strategies to help you do that. Some topics that are pretty common: biology, psychology, business, and history and art. I would say biology is probably the most common. Let's talk about templates. So we're going to go through an example, and I'm going to show you some different templates. Before I do, I want you to think about this question like you are a teacher. So you want to imagine, now I know not everybody wants to be a teacher, it's not for everybody, but I want you to imagine that this reading passage and this listening passage, after you do it, after you read and listen, you have to explain it to somebody. Maybe a high school student is a good example. And so when you're teaching and explaining to somebody, your voice changes. Like this voice that I have right now, this is not my normal voice. This is not how I talk to my friends. This is not how I talk to my family. You know, your voice changes depending on the situation. But notice how when you're teaching, my voice goes up a little more. I'm a little bit softer, a little bit nicer. I have more music in my speech. So when you're talking like a teacher, you want somebody to listen, you want somebody to understand, so your voice changes a little bit. So that's a good mindset to keep in mind. You're not trying to make a business deal and talking a mile a minute, okay? You're trying to teach somebody something. So, starting your response is tough. A good introduction will help you feel confident, will help you start strong. It's something I talk about a lot, is starting strong is one of the best ways to improve your confidence, because when it says, ready, speak now, it's really uncomfortable. I don't know, swarm intelligence. Just try to get right into it. Okay, the topic is, so let's look at some introductions. According to the reading, swarm intelligence is, and you define it, the reading passage describes a concept known as swarm intelligence. The lecture is about swarm intelligence, which is, okay. So this is the topic, this is the reading passage, and this is my first sentence. According to the reading, swarm intelligence is when a bunch of different insects of the same species are able to combine and connect their thoughts so hundreds of individuals can think and act as one. So in the beginning, I introduce the topic, in this case swarm intelligence, and then I give the definition. It's a bunch of different insects of the same species that are able to combine and connect their thoughts so hundreds of individuals can think and act as one. All right, next step is I have to talk about the lecture. So I've talked very little about the reading, mostly about the lecture. So these are the different transitions to the lecture. I'll just read the first one. In the lecture, the professor delves deeper into the subject by explaining, and then you talk about the first example. So basically, when you're doing this question number 3, you have a reading passage, you read it for 45 seconds, it goes away, and then you listen to a lecture about the reading passage, and the lecture will usually give 1 or 2 explanations, examples about the passage. So that's why we're going to use this transition. So in the lecture, transition, the professor delves deeper into this subject by explaining that ants use this type of thinking when gathering food. So that's the first example, ants gathering food. And then I explain it more. One group of ants will find a way to the food source and release pheromones to mark the trail. Other ants will then follow the pheromone scent. Okay, got that. And then the next thing is where I say, he goes on to say. Now, so again, the listening, there are 2 examples. So that's what you're going to do. Next, you're going to introduce the second example. He or she goes on to say. Secondly, the professor describes. The professor goes on to say. So just pick whichever one fits you best. Remember, the reason why I give you more than one way of using a template is because everybody's different. Your pronunciation is different. You might have trouble saying a word like secondly. That might be a little bit difficult for you. Or you might have trouble with a word like describes. Maybe the cr sound is a little bit hard for you to make. So you want to say explain instead. Use words and phrases that you feel comfortable and confident using. It'll help you on test day. So there's my second example. He goes on to say that honeybees use this type of intelligence when looking for a new place to live. And I expand on it, I explain it more. In fact, a queen bee might send out a pheromone that attracts thousands of other bees that come together and form a kind of temporary home where the bees can survive. Okay, so I talk about the example in more detail, and I use the word in fact. Here are some other phrases that you can use to give more information. Further still, additionally, moreover, or in other words. So these are different ways to add information. You don't have to do that, but I did it. And then if you notice, I have a little conclusion there. It says, so after listening, I now have a better understanding of what swarm intelligence is. So these are different ways of finishing up, of doing a conclusion. I made a kind of different one for question number 3. All of these work, all these are fine. Your conclusion is optional. You don't have to put a conclusion. I put one here. Like for all the questions in TOEFL Speaking, Your conclusion is like an extra 5 seconds in your pocket. If you need to speak for more time, use a conclusion. If you're like, okay, I said everything from the reading and from the listening, I'm done, but I still have 5 seconds, 10 seconds, okay, let me say a conclusion. But if you are speaking and you get cut off and you don't have time for a conclusion, no problem. All of the templates are here, all the possible things you can say. I've talked about all of this and I put the time here too. Take a screenshot of this, keep it handy for yourself and refer back to it when you need it. But yeah, again, use the phrases, use the words that you feel comfortable using. And for some people, they're like, just tell me what to do. I don't want to pick. Okay, here's the sample template. You can use this template and you'll do just fine. Okay, so here's the sample template. Again, you can take a screenshot of it if you like. So let's talk about taking notes now. So that's very important because when you have to speak, you can't see the reading and you can't see the listening. So you have to rely on your memory. But you also have a piece of paper and a pencil, and you could take notes and you could look at your notes. So let's talk about some ways to do that. But before I do, check out TOEFL Emergency Course Premium. So this is an offer only for the YouTube audience. $97 usually is now $67. This is for anybody who has a month or less to prepare. 2 months is okay, but if you have 2 months or more, then I think you could find something else with more practice. I mean, you could use this, but I think you'll go through most of the material in about a month or two. This has a study plan. If you only have 2 days to prepare, 1 week to prepare, 2 weeks to prepare, or 1 month to prepare. So of course, 2 days is pretty intense. It's a pretty intense 2 days, but you can do it in 2 days. I include only the most important information for TOEFL, the best tips and tricks that you need to get the highest possible score on test day. So that's why I made this course TOEFL Emergency Premium. Some people, they have more than a couple days to prepare, up to a month. This is perfect. Has, I think, 6 complete tests, has more practice questions. Check it out. I'll put a link in the description. This is only for the YouTube audience, so you won't find this link anywhere else. All right, TOEFL Emergency Premium. One more shout out is to my own site, Speaker English. Now this is for people who are struggling with the TOEFL speaking. If you keep getting 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 maybe in the TOEFL speaking and you need to get a 26 or higher, I created this TOEFL speaking study plan. This is specifically for you. You're getting a 20 to 24 in TOEFL speaking, you keep struggling and you don't know how to improve, you've got a study plan here. Everything is laid out for you so you know what to do every day. 15, 20 minutes a day of practice. And if you practice every day for 30 days, you're guaranteed to see results. So check that out at speakerenglish.com. Let me get back to the lecture. So again, this is the outline for question number 3. You have 45 seconds to read, and then you listen to a lecture, and then you have a question that you prepare for, and then you speak. Let's look at this in a little more detail, and let's look at how to take notes. So when you're reading the passage, what should you be thinking about? What should you be looking for? What do you need to know when you speak? If you remember from my response, I didn't say a lot from the reading. So you don't have to actually write a lot. You only have to identify the topic, which is usually the title, and define it. So they'll give you the title, swarm intelligence, and then you have to say what swarm intelligence is. That's pretty much it. That's all you really need from the reading passage. I have this part highlighted in red that says additional notes. You can put additional notes, other things that you think are helpful from the reading passage, but it's not necessary. All you have to do is write down the title and what it means. So swarm intelligence, the topic, and then definition, hundreds of organisms work together to benefit the group. I'll also add that in the question, they tell you what the topic is. They say, using the examples from the talk, please explain what swarm intelligence is. So you actually don't even have to write down the topic, but I think it's a good idea. So it's up to you, if you want to or not. But definitely write down the definition, what it means. It'll be helpful. Now, some people say they can't write notes and read at the same time. If you have to pick one, read. Focus on reading and understanding the reading, and only take notes if you can understand the reading and take notes at the same time. If it's something that you're really struggling with, try to work on it. Try to say, okay, I'm going to write down just 2 words from the reading. And then tomorrow, okay, I'm going to just write down 3 words from the reading. So it's up to you how to do it, but focus on the reading and understanding the reading first. These are my notes here. I wrote a couple additional things. Clearly, these are too many notes. Let me just say that. This is too many notes. I prepared this, and so I had a lot of time. This is not like the TOEFL, so I would say you're probably going to write 5, 6, 7, 8 words. This is too much. So don't worry about this, but just want to show you an example of some things that I wrote down. You won't need this information. So notes are not as important as comprehension. Understand first, write second. So make sure you understand what you're reading first. If then you have some time, write down some notes. So after you do that from the reading, you want to identify the first example and second example from the listening. So it's an example or an illustration or a characteristic or a rule or something like that. So there's two things in the listening, and you have to understand what they are, write them down, and write down any details you can. So it'll say, now listen to a lecture in biology. And these are what my notes will look like. I'm looking for example and any details, and the second example and any details. So that's what I'm listening for. When you have a plan of what you're listening for, you will be much more attuned to the listening. So a lot of people, when they start listening on TOEFL, they're just like, I'm going to write down everything I hear. That's not what you should be doing. You should be focusing on the two examples and any details about the two examples. This is a long transcript of what the lecture says. We're not going to listen to the lecture here, but this is a long transcript. That's a lot of information, okay? Obviously, you can't write down all this information. It's going to be hard to remember all this information. So you just want to write down a couple things. The first paragraph is all set up. Second paragraph, ants, they work together to find stuff, find food. The individual ant, I'll read the part highlighted in red. Well, the individual ants mark the route with their scent, also known as a pheromone. So I put route with pheromone. By the way, if you have no idea how to write pheromone, just write down what you hear, like F-E-R-mone or something. This scent, left by one individual ant, will be sensed and followed by other members of the colony. And so I wrote one pheromone followed by others. I could have wrote the number 1 there instead of 1. But anyway. Okay. And the more ants that follow the same trail, the more pheromones they leave behind. The path turns into a kind of ant superhighway. So I wrote ants follow the same trail. They don't go another way. Okay. You don't have to take notes. These are my notes. You don't have to write as many notes as I do. It's up to you. I recommend them because when it's time to speak, it's hard to remember all this stuff. Okay, so your notes kind of serve as a trigger for your memory. The second example, honeybees, okay? And then I read this whole thing. During adverse weather conditions, a thunderstorm, for example, bees may lose their nest and must find a new home. However, it takes time to find an ideal location and build their new home. So I wrote lose nest and storm. So the queen bee will find a branch on a tree and send out pheromones that the worker bees follow. Once they find the queen, the worker bees will collect and press together, forming a kind of giant pine cone that can include up to 10,000 bees, if you can believe it. Cool! All right, so then they say form pine cone, and they die if they're not in a collection. And I wrote that down. So I have my notes, have the reading, have the listening, time for me to speak, and I can use these to help. This is a lot of notes. Don't have to write this much. This is too much. I'm just showing you an example for a video about question 3, so I want to just show you everything, but you don't have to write this much. Focus on just speaking well and understanding what you heard and what you read about. And then you answer the question, 30 seconds to prepare, and then you give a beautiful speaking response like this one. All right, so that's that. Let me talk a bit about the last part, self-grading. How do you grade yourself? Well, most people, they don't have access to a teacher. At tstprep.com, we have teachers that do speaking evaluations. A lot of people like it. I highly recommend it, but it's not for everybody. Not everybody can afford that. One site that I highly recommend is My Speaking Score. There's a link in the description to an offer for TST Prep students. It's pretty cheap. And the good thing about this site is that they use the same software as ETS, as the TOEFL. It's called SpeechRater. So the score that you get on your speaking on this site will be very similar or the same as you'll get on test day. Maybe not, I shouldn't say that, it depends, but it's the same scoring. It's scored the same way. So you can also find your strengths and weaknesses really well with this site. So I highly recommend my speaking score. Again, I'll put a link in the description. And another site that's free, actually, you can use it for 30 minutes for free, is ELSA Speech Analyzer. This is not TOEFL exactly, but they give you AI-powered feedback on your speaking, and you can find out if you're saying enough words per minute, if your pronunciation is off, if you need some help linking words together, if you have some problems with intonation. There's a lot of things here that gives you a lot of good information. I highly recommend ELSA Speech Analyzer, so I'll put a link in the description there as well. The reason why those sites and working with a teacher is so helpful is because these rubrics, like this is from ETS, this is the grading rubric for TOEFL, it's not very helpful. It tells you delivery, you have to deliver it really well, language use, topic development. You can read this and you think, okay, I still don't really get what my score would be or what I can do better. So that's why I made a checklist for each question type. They're pretty similar for the integrated questions. And so this is the checklist. So basically what you want to do is you want to do a question number 3, record your voice, listen to your voice, fun. Everybody loves their own voice. Nah, not really. But if you want to improve, that's how you get better. You listen to your own voice and you ask yourself these questions. Did I speak for 57 to 60 seconds? Was my introduction 15 seconds or less? And so on. You can ask yourself these questions and you could start to find things that might be some trouble for you that you want to improve before test day. But that's it. If you need to have this information on hand, the checklist is there too. Download the 26 guide. It's very helpful. It's free. Link in the description. And if you are ready, I would recommend taking a TOEFL speaking practice test. There's one right here. You can check it out. Thank you all for watching. I hope you found this helpful. And sorry it was so long, but I hope you got some information that you can use. And I'll see you next time.